Hello, everybody. This is Pray for Enemy, and we're looking at all of the GOP presidential primary candidates, and we're looking at how they're doing nationally and how they're polling in those two early key states, Iowa and New Hampshire. We're also going to take a look at some strengths. We're going to take a look at some weaknesses and, some more grand narratives that are hovering around these candidates. So this is your polling update for July 2023, and, let's just jump right into it. First, we have Donald Trump, the big boy himself. Nationally, he's at 52.4%. A little bit of a step behind in the first two states, 46 in Iowa, 43 in New Hampshire, or 44 in New Hampshire, sorry. In terms of strengths, right now, it looks like he has a very strong base of support. And it's really his race to lose. He has somewhat of an incumbency advantage. I kind of think about it that way, even though he doesn't have the seat of the president. I guess that depends on who you ask, but he does not have the seat of the president. In terms of weaknesses, obviously the indictment is hanging over him. If he goes to jail, I don't see that being a plus in his book, but I mean, you never know. American politics has gotten weird in the past, and it could get even weirder. In terms of weaknesses, in terms of another weakness, I'd say the abortion issue, and he sort of seems to be having a waning support with evangelicals, although that's very early. It's tough to tell. I think one of the key indications is that these two early swing states, Iowa and New Hampshire, are very dominated by the evangelical presence, and for him to be a few steps behind and where he is nationally is a little bit of a warning sign, but it's not too big right now. We'll see how it shakes up in the future. But that's kind of where Donald Trump's at right now. Number two, we have Ron DeSantis. Nationally, he's polling at 21.5. In the early swing state of Iowa, he's polling a little bit ahead at 24.7. And New Hampshire, he's pretty far behind his national polling average at 17.7. In terms of his strengths right now, I think he has a strong conservative reputation. People see him as the only other viable alternative to Donald Trump, so that puts him in a really good position, at least when you compare him to the other candidates who are not named Donald Trump. But in terms of his weaknesses, he's not Donald Trump, so I don't know if he's going to be able to set himself apart from Donald Trump enough to make it worth consideration. I think one of the issues could be anti-wokeness. Maybe he's seen as more of an ideological figure on that end. I think the abortion issue might be somewhere he can cut into Donald Trump. But again, it's looking more of a long shot, but he still has a pulse in these national polls, and he's doing a little bit better in Iowa, so we'll see how it shakes out on that. In terms of another weakness, I think the Disney issue may be a little bit more than he can chew off. It seems like he's not getting the victories that he wants. He doesn't look like he has the leverage that he thought he had. And then also there's been some unsavory figures, people flying Nazi flags and stuff in front of the Disney world that's over there in Florida, and so maybe it's more of an optics nightmare than he thought it would be, and maybe it's something that proves to be a negative for him in the future, but it's too early to tell right now. Number three, Mike Pence, pretty far behind from number two to number three, big gap there. Mike Pence is polling 5.7 nationally, 3.7 in Iowa, 2.7 in New Hampshire. And so that's where he's at. He's pretty far behind Ron DeSantis, but it's really early again. In terms of strength, I think evangelical support is going to be really a big factor in this election, and he definitely has the street cred in the evangelical lane. On issues like abortion, he's seen as or at least in my eyes, he seems to be like the only, ideologically committed figure in the race. And so I think he'll be able to gain a lot of evangelical support as this primary moves further into the early states. And he also has very high name recognition. Obviously, being the former vice president of the United States, that definitely gives him a leg up, especially compared to other candidates that I think are similar. Your Asa Hutchinsons, your Doug Bergmont, whoever the North Dakota governor is. I can't even remember his name. That's the point on name recognition. He has a very strong base of support in terms of the people who understand, people who know his name. A weakness I can see going into the future is maybe he's a little bit too radical on abortion. We'll see how well the evangelical vote comes out to support him. But if he's sort of alienating to the rest of the Republican voter base, then that could be an issue for him moving forward. But again, it's too early to tell. It's only July 2023, but those are some just early observations coming out from Mike Pence's campaign. Number four, we have Nikki Haley polling at 3.6 nationally and a little bit better in those early states, Iowa and New Hampshire, about a point ahead of where she is at nationally. In terms of strengths, I see her as having a lot of financial backing. She's going to be able to run a lot of ads in these early swing states, or not these early key states in the primary. and that's going to be a big advantage for her. She sort of has the thumbs up from the Republican establishment, the Republican donor base, and so that's definitely going to be a good thing for her. But in terms of weaknesses, it's a double-edged sword here, right? Lots of financial backing, right? We're sort of in a anti-establishment, populist, anti-corruption, whatever you want to call it, sort of moment. And I think that a Republican presidential candidate who isn't, at least doesn't have a little bit of a outsider edge to them, is going to be really hard for the Republican voter base to swallow. But again, it is still early. We'll see how it cashes out. But if I was a betting man, I wouldn't have too much faith in Nikki Haley's ability to garner support into the future. Also, I think in terms of her political skills and charisma, she doesn't seem like she really has it. She's not a very talented campaigner, although she is very smart. Um, she's had a governorship, which is nothing to laugh at. She's also been ambassador to the UN. So those are two really sort of nitty-gritty administrative positions, but I don't think that translates to skill on the campaign. Every time I hear her talk, it seems very canned. And every time, I look at a tweet, it seems really cooked up by some sort of brain trust that's behind the scenes. So that's sort of my observations on Nikki Haley. Moving on to number 5, Tim Scott, actually, which is surprising to me. I didn't think that he would get this much support early, but nationally he's at 3.5. Iowa, he's at around 3%. And New Hampshire, a little bit better, a little bit with the rest of the pack at 4.3%. In terms of his strengths, I think he's a younger, friendlier face. He's also a black Republican, which I think helps. He's sort of just a new face on the Republican Party. He also seems more moderate on the issues, so if there's a voter base in the Republican Party that really wants somebody who's more moderate on the issues, I can see him doing a little bit better than he is right now, but again, it's too early to see exactly what kind of the constituency makeup of the Republican voter base is, but those are some early observations I have in terms of his strengths. In terms of his weaknesses, I think low name recognition is going to be a problem for him, so if he's able to get out there with some ads and get people to know his name, that's going to be good. And, he is the senator from South Carolina. South Carolina is an important state in the primary, but it is a sort of kind of an island. The name recognition out of that state doesn't necessarily carry you too far. And then in terms of weaknesses, this is kind of another double-sided thing. So he's moderate on the issues, but then that means he's not exciting enough. So if there's a base that gets really amped up about sort of the existential issues that the Republican voter base really cares about, I'm thinking about abortion, I'm thinking about the anti-woke stuff. Those kind of issues, the kind of more online issues, the issues that get people animated, he might not be the guy who's super exciting to the Republican voters in that regard. So that's a weakness that I see that could play out. But again, still too early to tell. Number 6, Vivek Ramaswamy. Nationally, he's at 2.4%. Iowa, a step behind at 1.7. New Hampshire, 2.7. In terms of his strengths, I think he has a really interesting set of strengths, right? He's the youngest candidate by a long shot, 7 years younger than Ron DeSantis. He's very energetic. He has a lot of charisma. When he talks, you really feel like he cares about the issues. And he sort of has this veneer of respectability around him. He talks, like he knows what he's doing, like he's in control of things, and he has a very strong understanding. And he also has a business background. The Republican voter base loves their candidates with a business background. I mean, think about Donald Trump. Even though, people call into question his success in business, right? But the persona, the sort of aesthetics around the businessman coming in, this is something that the voter base really likes. Not necessarily on the presidential level, right? I can only think of a few examples of people who have made big strides at the presidential level, but at the Senate level, at the gubernatorial level, it's definitely something that plays very well with the Republican base. So we'll see how Vivek Ramaswamy is able to sort of leverage that strength that he has. In terms of weaknesses, he's an upstart candidate, so he's going to have low name recognition. But I think that as more people sort of start to have a buzz around him, he's made several appearances on mainstream media, Fox News and the like. I think that is a weakness that he can take care of very easily. I think that people will end up knowing his name sooner rather than later into the primary cycle. But another weakness that I see is that he might just be a touch too online, right? I think that his issue set is very online, and I don't necessarily see him talking about economic bread and butter issues. So we'll see how the Republican voter base feels about that. But it's too early to tell, but if I was to throw out a weakness, that would be one of the things. I think he might be a little bit too online, podcasts, right? Like people who listen to podcasts, that's not everybody, okay? So that's some observations on Vivek Ramaswamy. At number 7, we have Christie, polling at 2.4 nationally. At Iowa, he's at 2%, but it's a low sample size because he wasn't included on many polls because he announced a little bit later. And then in New Hampshire, he's doing a lot better than he is nationally, 4.7%. So he's kind of in there with the rest of the sort of people who are not Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump. So he's doing a little bit better in New Hampshire. In terms of strengths, I think he's a clear alternative to Trumpism. He's been making very strong attacks in that regard. Oh, here's a mistake. Trumpism should probably be capitalized. AP police, don't call the AP police on me. Whatever. And then also, I think he's a very politically talented attacker. He's a very strong speaker. He's really ready to attack in that regard. So I think depending on how the voter base is really, receptive to that kind of thing, his natural strength in attacking could be a plus for him. In his 2016 run, I heard reports that he was sort of people on his team told him to kind of reel it back a little bit. And so that probably was really detrimental to him in the 2016 campaign. And, if we fast forward to 2024, I think that he could be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more of an attack dog when it comes to the primary race. So we'll see how that goes. In terms of weaknesses, his weakness is that he's too dissident on Trump, right? So it depends on how the rest of the race shakes out, but I think that this is the big weakness. He might just be saying things that the Republican voter base doesn't want to hear. They might just be too far on the Trump train, and that's going to be it. There's not too much to say, right? If the voters don't want to hear it, then the voters don't want to hear it. Okay. But he is taking a kind of gamble, and you never know how it's going to shake out. But if I was a betting man, I wouldn't bet money on it. Let's talk about the rest of the field really quickly. Asa Hutchinson polling at 0.8 nationally. Doug Elder voting at 0.7, and Doug Burnham pointing at 0.3. There's a few other people who have announced for the race, but they're not really hitting the seismograph as of right now. But we will keep you updated if they ever do. So that was July 2023. We're going to be updating every month, right? So come in every month for sort of the grand narratives around the campaigns and also like how they're doing nationally. And we'll be here every month and, the days in between. We're uploading daily on this channel. So thank you for watching. My Twitter is @PrayForEnemy. You can go there to subscribe for updates. And also, we talk about politics on here. We talk about sociology. We talk about philosophy. So if that sounds very interesting to you, go ahead and click that subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated. And that's all I have to say. That's July 2023 for the 2024 Republican primary. Thank you again for watching. We're looking at how they're polling nationally and how they're polling in those two early swing states. They're not swing states. They're key states.